the breakup of the United Kingdom.
There's a fundamental factor at work here. The clue is in the name, British Muslim. It's all about the religion. For the believers here, the Quran provides teachings and guidance for Muslims to follow in all aspects of their lives. It's a kind of rule book for day-to-day living.
We can't be a person of faith for a particular day or time. It's with us 24 hours a day. It's all within a certain framework.
And this has had kind of knock-on effects, and the UK is more broadly is kind of following this. So since last year, we started to more kind of systematically count far-right terror-related convictions in the UK. So since 1997, about 25 years, we've counted 128 convictions. 76 of those are in the last 5 years. So that's almost 2/3, about 60%, in just a fifth of that time. So that's undeniably a rise. And separately from that, we're also seeing kind of a trend in who is convicted. The average age of the perpetrators have dropped significantly. It's now, in the last 5 years, 28 years, and 18 of these 76 convictions are teenagers, compared to just 6 in total in the previous 20 years. So there's something going on here. The question is this just an issue of increased attention by the police? Is it actually a good thing? We're finding people that weren't found before, that maybe in the early 2000s, these mostly young men were let to roam free, or they were kind of convicted under other forms of legislation, related to other forms of violence and such, but not political violence. And there is some of that. That is true. The police has put more emphasis on far-right violence. There's been a big effort to find them, and more of them are trialed under terror legislation. But it's not the whole story. At the same time, we have kind of a changing landscape in online organizing within the far right. And what we're seeing there is that it's moved to the internet. Especially these alternative social media platforms that Joe talked about before, that are largely unmoderated and largely anonymous, allows people to connect in a way they couldn't 20 years ago. It allows young people to participate in far-right groups in ways they couldn't before, because they don't have the means to travel, for example. Just because they are so young, they wouldn't be let in. But online, you can be anyone. And we've seen young people as young as 13, 14, pretending to be 20-year-olds in order to gain legitimacy and run groups themselves even. So kind of social media has allowed a broader range of people to get engaged. And then you spend time in these groups, and you gradually consume far-right propaganda, and kind of by the group pressure get radicalized and take action yourself, often not as part of a group, but as an individual. That this is what people kind of lazily call lone wolves, but they are really part of a network. But they might act on their own, but they are encouraged and supported and driven to it by a very close-knit and very active group of people online that they talk with probably every day. So this has kind of changed how you can engage, and this is also kind of an extension of the post-organizational element of the far right now. We're also seeing kind of a bit of a naivety in the far right. So part of the issue with online communities, especially when they're anonymous, is that there's an element of upmanship. You want to be more extreme, you want to say more outrageous things. It's sometimes called shit posting. You want to cause outrage as a form of entertainment. But in these groups, that's politicized and it's taken to a very extreme level. But these kind of communities and these kind of contexts where you are pushed to always be more extreme and kind of prove yourself as a real dedicated far-right activists kind of pushes people into kind of illegal territory. So you might share bomb-making material or bomb-making manuals rather and instructions on how to build weapons and in order to show that you are really extreme rather than explicitly planning to do those things. So that's important to take into account here as well. There's also kind of a culture of sounding extreme, which is not necessarily exactly the same thing as actually carrying it out. But it does push you into over the line into illegal territories when you share manuals that can be useful for terrorism, and combined with police attention on it, that leads to more arrests. So that's one explanation. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't take this seriously. People from these groups have just in the last years, been arrested and convicted for planning and getting quite far in committing really violent acts. We have a very young guy planning to murder a classmate of his, and had gotten quite far in planning that. So it's still like a relevant, it's not something to kind of ignore as a form of rebellion by young people or something similar to that. It's very serious things. A young man, a 16-year-old, has a huge amount of potential to cause a lot of damage if he really wants to. It's no different really from a 20-year-old in that sense. So that's kind of where we are in terrorism right now. And just in the last couple of months, we've the first months of this year rather, we've already had several arrests and start of trials, which is not counted in these statistics I'm bringing up now. And there are many ongoing trials as well. And part of that trend, which is also worth mentioning, is kind of the focus on improvised weapons. This is in part inspired by the Halle shooting in Germany from 2019, who explicitly aimed to kind of show the viability of home-built weapons. The shooter there had built his own semi-automatic rifle that worked reasonably well. He killed 2 people, and he live streamed the attack, which kind of put an emphasis on this kind of phenomenon that you can build weapons yourself, because that's an issue in most of Europe, where access to weapons is not very easy compared to the US, for example. And next to this, we have a kind of an interest in 3D printed weapons, which is tricky, and also explosives, which are always kind of home constructed. So there's a lot of kind of worrying trends there, and part of this is this kind of online sphere where very extreme people can get in touch with each other and share tips and advice and radicalize each other. And at the same time, it's also about kind of a feeling that things are not moving fast enough, that the alt-right and Trump years that made them optimistic for a while, but ultimately it didn't change society at its core as much as they hoped it would, and therefore they grew impatient. Another kind of moving on then to kind of the fitness groups that I wrote about in this report as well. It's connected in the sense that it's also about an impatience with online activism and the feeling that they want to take action in some kind of more practical way. And what I mean by fitness groups, which is clearly not self-evident, is online communities which are far right ideologically, that bring in people with kind of the promise of helping each other to grow stronger physically and mentally, but primarily physically. So it's advice groups for how to go to the gym and what to eat and how to grow your muscles, which is by itself not necessarily far right, but these are because they combine these fitness advice and how to get fitter and healthier with extreme fascist ideology, far right texts, anti-Semitism, extreme racism of all sorts. And the danger is that it works ultimately. It's that the men who come into these groups, they do actually make improvements, they make friends, and they get stronger, they feel better, while at the same time being kind of fed far-right ideology. So they start to connect fascism with feeling better. And the way we see this is that during the pandemic, during COVID, it was difficult for the far right to organize. As we said before, they can't meet up, it's dangerous. It was illegal and so on. But to improve yourself physically, to go to the gym and share the kind of progress with people online, it's something practical. It's something you can do in the real world. And because fascism kind of visualizes and sees the health of the nation as the sum of the health of the individuals that make it up, you do something for your country, you do something for your race when you grow stronger. And this is an old fascist idea, this is nothing new. But combined with these kind of online community elements and COVID, it's been an increasing focus by the far right that's kind of attracted a lot of people. We've seen new people join through these groups, and we've seen them radicalize quite extremely. And separately from this, of course, is kind of the potential for violence that increases when they do these sorts of workouts, because it's also combined with actual kind of martial arts and that sort of thing. And we've seen groups practicing, small groups, 2-3 people going out in the forest and practicing beating each other up, essentially. And they talk about using that on their political opponents, which is part of this wider trend of accepting violence as a legitimate means to affect change.
Now, if I don't like it, I'm not going to go and start a big protest or, just start hating on them on social media. That's not what I'm going to do. I'm just going to ignore them.
Atif's attitude is typical of the majority, but 18% of British Muslims, a sizable minority, do sympathise with the use of violence against those who mock the Prophet. It's a kind of rule book for day-to-day living.
We can't be a person of faith for a particular day or time. It's with us 24 hours a day. It's all within a certain framework.
This is the reality of life and free speech.
Here, anyone can express pretty much any opinion they like, however offensive.
Shut your stupid American mouth.
Most British Muslims think it's against holy law to show an image of the Prophet Muhammad. They're particularly offended by mockery of God's messenger.
But they've seen it now, and that's true. So,
in the toilet of doom.
Bye-bye.